Yes, Internet people, the MCU train is back on track. The TV series are nice, but even more, movies are in theaters again. We're now coming up on the Eternals release date. As the Infinity Saga fades into the rearview, Thanos' ashes disperse, and we ooze torturously out of the pandemic. It is a good time to talk about where things sit for the biggest cinematic mega franchise in Hollywood history, as it pivots to television. I'm going to make 3 videos here. First, we'll look back and ask, how did the MCU get here? Why are they doing so much better than the other mega IP franchises? Next, we'll look at problems facing the MCU going forward, because some of the seeds of the MCU's potential downfall are in what's already come. How do they stay on top? Well, I'll begin with a few problems that are not gumming up the works yet, but could soon. Finally, I'll talk about 2 problems that are making trouble for the MCU right now, whether they can sort them out, and whether it matters. First, a look back. Slow clap for the Infinity Saga. Wow. I doubt we'll see anything hit that balance of ambitious and painstaking again. They built a cinematic universe from the ground up, and sold us on the idea of a cinematic universe at the same time. Endgame paid off 20 films of build-up with a climax that felt worth it. We cheered in the movie theater. High fives all around. Running a mega franchise ain't easy. A look around. Star Wars and DC face-planted. People just kind of stopped caring about Transformers, Pirates of the Caribbean, and the Potterverse. And everybody's got a hot take on why. Disney and Marvel did a few things better than any other mega franchise, but they also had some structural advantages. How'd they do it? Well, reason 1, the MCU was new. When Iron Man came out, they had the freedom to set fan expectations to fit their strategy, without any inertia to kick against. This matters because almost every other franchise is competing with its own past. Who's the best Batman? Are the Star Wars prequels better than we remember? Which edition of Star Wars is truly canon, Greedo? Will any James Bond ever surpass Sean Connery? Same for Superman with Christopher Reeve. The MCU didn't have any of that, because there was no Iron Man before Robert Downey Jr. This golden age of fresh looks is ending now. Cap and Iron Man have left the building. Black Panther needs a new T'Challa. And if X-Men and the Fantastic Four enter the MCU, we're going to have to get used to a new Wolverine and other casting drama. Even more than the casting, though, the older franchises are competing with nostalgia. If you saw your first Star Wars film before age 10, well, congratulations. But there is no way a Star Wars you see first when you're 25 or 35 or 55 will ever make you feel like that film did when you were 7. MCU didn't have to compete with the way their films made people feel when they were kids, which is a huge advantage over franchises that are always being measured against their own fans' nostalgia. Next, frequency. Audiences had gotten used to 3 Star Wars films per generation. 3 films, each a few years apart, and then a break. Disney learned, painfully, that 3 Star Wars films in 2 years was just too much. It might have spoiled one of the greatest IPs in Western entertainment in their greed. Disney didn't realize that Star Wars was like the Olympics. Scarcity was a selling point, not a bug. Every 4 years we get excited about the Olympics, but if the Olympics happened every year, we'd tune out. One Star Wars trilogy a generation? Yeah, we clear our schedules for that. That's an event. But too many films, too fast, diluted that feeling, that special something. The MCU didn't have to consider scarcity or scarcity in the past. They could roll out 3 or 4 films a year without anybody going, wow, Marvel releases way more films than they used to, because the MCU didn't used to exist. 4 films a year? Sure, okay. Just by being new, MCU didn't have to deal with 2 of the biggest thorns in the side of almost every other mega franchise. Reason 2 they did so well. They got us to care about the first set of characters and nailed the casting. Franchises have to do this or they don't become franchises. I mean, think of Spider-Man versus Fantastic Four. But MCU casting was inspired. Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America were all A-plus castings, and each got origin stories that made us care about them. Every major role in the MCU so far has been a B-plus casting or better, which is a remarkable run. Reason 3. The MCU introduced the weird comic booky stuff very gradually. Now you know how sometimes the answer to the question how or why in a comic book is just, because comic books, that's why. Why does that guy keep dying and coming back? Because comic books. How did Flash just erase 30 years of events in the DC universe? Because comic books. How can she fight in that outfit without her everything popping out? Because comic books, my friend. Comic readers have been trained to have a pretty low threshold for suspension of disbelief. Well, Spider-Man's been a clone for a decade. Oh, okay, Spider-Man's a clone now. Also, Spider-Man is black.
What?
Yeah, okay, not always. But movie audiences do not give up their suspension of disbelief as willingly as comic readers. And you don't get months and months to push the line either. The MCU brought film audiences along, introducing goofy because comic book stuff very gradually. Think back to Phase 1. Iron Man was basically a really good engineer. Nothing loopy or weird there. Hulk was a familiar character, thanks to the old TV show. Captain America was a war film, which is a familiar genre grounded in realism. We didn't see our first Infinity Stone until the 5th MCU movie. Even Thor, the goofiest film of Phase 1, leaves Asgard and mostly happens on Earth. The first spaceship we saw was in Avengers. The first character in open space was Iron Man, pushing the nuke through the wormhole. 10 seconds in open space for the entirety of Phase 1. That was it. Now Phase 2 gave us spaceships, a talking tree, a sentient evil robot, and Pym particles. But they also grounded the goofy stuff with nostalgic 70s pop, daddy issues, and a lot of best friend stuff. Feige and company raised the weirdness bar really, really gradually, so that by the time the big purple guy shows up, we cared about what that would mean for Tony Stark and Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff. Reason 4 they did so well. The MCU played around with genres. Now, that by itself is a really old, kind of tired take. But let me add that it was much easier for Marvel to do this than other franchises. Most of the other mega IPs have their genres baked in from the start. Star Wars, Harry Potter, James Bond, Pirates of the Caribbean, Transformers, Mission Impossible, none of them can be genre flipped. The idea of a Harry Potter space adventure, a Pirates of the Caribbean political thriller, or a James Bond teen movie is just ridiculous on its face. But every different MCU protagonist gives you a chance to switch up genres, so Ant-Man can do heist movies without boxing Spider-Man into that genre. Fans get that a Captain America movie has different rules than a Thor movie. This meant the MCU could offer more variety than any other mega franchise, and, here's the second thing, because of that, they could roll out so many films so close together. Imagine getting 3 Fast and the Furious films in 1 year, or 4 James Bonds. We'd get so sick of them. But 2017 gave us Guardians of the Galaxy 2, a space adventure, Spider-Man Homecoming, a high school movie, Thor Ragnarok, a screwball buddy comedy, all in 1 year. And it was fine, because each genre switch hits a reset button. Most other franchises find success by knowing what they are and delivering on that promise. James Bond, John Wick, Deadpool, those franchises have their audiences dialed in. Very few franchises successfully change things up. Fast and Furious went from muscle car heist movies to muscle car Mission Impossible. But the MCU is the rare IP that grabs us with variety rather than consistency. And that is how the MCU got here. But you know, when Searchers came out in 1956, it probably seemed like Westerns would rule Hollywood forever. Never forget that past success does not ensure future success, and it never has. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about the pitfalls coming up, which the MCU needs to avoid. Thanks everybody for watching, and please remember to subscribe for more of the very important opinions of a middle-aged white guy.